In this lesson, I want to compare momentum, inertia, and impulse. And we're going to do that using two objects. Car 1, a Camry, which has a mass of 1,200 kilograms, has a velocity of 15 meters per second. And Car 2, a smart car, has a mass of 880 kilograms and is moving at 22 meters per second. And the three questions that we're going to explore are: which has a greater momentum, which of the two has a greater inertia, and which requires more impulse. So momentum, well, Car 1 and Car 2, momentum is calculated using the product of mass times velocity. So the mass times velocity of Car 1 works out to 18,000 kilogram meters per second, and Car 2 is 19,800 kilogram meters per second, which tells us that Car 2 has a greater momentum, and the reason for that is it's a product of two things, mass times velocity. Now, which has a greater inertia? Well, Car 1 is going to have the greater inertia because it has more mass. Inertia only depends on mass. It does not depend on the velocity of the object. If the object was stationary or moving, that car is going to have more inertia every single time. Now, which require more impulse? Well, impulse to do what? Change the momentum of an object. And since we require an impulse to change the momentum of an object, there are two factors that come into play: mass and velocity. So it depends on both mass and velocity, because momentum is mass times the change in velocity. So we actually have to change the velocity in order to answer this question. So let's say, for example, we increase both by 10 meters per second. So Car 1, which has a mass of 1,200 and an initial velocity of 15, we're going to change that up to 25. So 25 minus 15 will give us a delta V of 10 meters per second. And we can calculate what the impulse is by multiplying mass and the change in velocity, and that will give us 12,000 kilogram meters per second. That means that we must apply an impulse of 12,000 kilogram meters per second in order to achieve that 10 meter per second velocity change. In the case of Car 2, we're going to change that also by 10 meters per second. And you see that the mass times the velocity works out to only 8,800 kilogram meters per second. So it's actually less impulse. It's easier to change the momentum of Car 2 for the reason is because it's a smaller object. It has less inertia. And the lower the object's inertia, the easier it is to move.